All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we are going way back to the Roaring Twenties
That's right, the 1920s.
to uncover a story so rife with corruption and scandal, it would make even the most cynical politician blush. That's right, we are talking about the Teapot Dome scandal. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with this little slice of American history, we are going to be uncovering every twist and turn of this wild ride, so buckle up.
This isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's a story that speaks to the very heart of power politics and the fight for control of valuable resources, in this case, oil.
Oil, the lifeblood of the rapidly industrializing world.
Imagine holding the key to the future. That's what oil represented back then, and everyone wanted a piece of the action.
So let's set the stage. We are in the 1920s. The post-World War I economic boom is in full swing, jazz is filling the airwaves, and the nation is thirsty for oil.
The demand for oil was skyrocketing, and the U.S. government held massive reserves, particularly in a place called Teapot Dome, Wyoming.
Now, Teapot Dome wasn't just any oil field. It was considered one of the most valuable in the entire country, a real gem in the government's crown jewels. And the Harding administration decides to lease this national treasure to private oil companies, raising eyebrows all over the country. I mean, think about it. You have this incredibly valuable resource that belongs to the people, and suddenly it's being handed over to private interests. Well, the public was outraged.
Particularly the Democrats. They smelled something fishy, sensing a blatant giveaway to Republican cronies.
And that's where Senator Thomas Walsh comes into the picture.
Walsh was a Democrat from Montana, a former prosecutor known for his tenacity and his unwavering commitment to justice.
He becomes the head of the Senate committee investigating the Teapot Dome lease, determined to get to the bottom of this whole affair.
He faced an uphill battle right from the start.
How so?
Well, for starters, the public wasn't initially all that interested in the investigation.
Really?
Yeah, people were more focused on the economic boom and the excitement of the Roaring Twenties.
So this whole scandal was flying under the radar.
Pretty much. And to make matters worse, many witnesses were reluctant to cooperate.
I can imagine.
They were either afraid of the consequences or they were tangled up in the whole web of corruption themselves. Hard evidence was scarce. It was like trying to grasp at smoke.
So Walsh needed a break, a real game changer, and that's where D.F. Stakelbeck enters the scene, a reporter for the Denver Post.
Stakelbeck had been digging into the background of Albert Fall, the former Interior Secretary who orchestrated the Teapot Dome lease.
And what did he find?
Oh boy, did he hit pay dirt. It turned out that Fall, who had been living a fairly modest life before becoming Interior Secretary, suddenly started spending money like there was no tomorrow.
Like winning the lottery, but without actually winning the lottery.
Precisely. He was making lavish upgrades to his ranch, buying expensive livestock, you name it.
Sounds suspicious.
It gets better. Stakelbeck discovered that some of these lavish gifts, like a herd of prized cattle, came directly from Harry Sinclair, one of the oil tycoons who benefited from the Teapot Dome deal.
So we were talking about a direct link between the guy who made the deal and the guy who got a sweetheart oil lease.
And to top it off, Fall even managed to pay off a bunch of back taxes that he had been owing for years.
Talk about a sudden windfall. It's pretty clear that something shady was going on here, right?
The evidence was mounting, and Stakelbeck knew he had stumbled onto something huge.
But here's where things take an unexpected turn.
Stakelbeck's own newspaper, the Denver Post, decided to bury the story.
What?
They were worried about legal repercussions. They didn't want to risk a lawsuit from someone like Sinclair.
So the truth was being silenced even by the very institution that was supposed to be upholding it.
It's a chilling reminder that powerful forces can sometimes obstruct the flow of information.
Fortunately, Stakelbeck recognized the gravity of what he had uncovered. He took his findings straight to Senator Walsh. And to make things even more interesting, he gave Walsh a lead to another potential witness, a man named Carl McGee, a former newspaper owner who had a personal grudge against Fall.
Talk about a plot twist. Walsh now had these tantalizing leads. But meanwhile, another oil tycoon involved in a separate lease deal with Fall starts to sweat. Edward Doheny.
Oh, Duaney, what did he do?
He had given Fall a so-called loan of $100,000.
$100,000?
Yeah, a lot of money back then. And the timing of this loan conveniently coincided with the oil lease deal he secured from Fall.
That sounds incredibly suspicious.
Doheny was starting to panic. He knew that if his loan to Fall was exposed as a bribe, the whole house of cards could come crashing down.
So what did he do?
He went straight to Fall and urged him to come up with a cover story, something that could explain away this suspicious $100,000 payment.
And all of this is happening during an election year.
Exactly. The Republicans were desperate to keep a lid on this brewing scandal. They knew it could cost them the election.
So Fall, caught between a rock and a hard place, tries to spin a yarn so outlandish it's almost comical. He claims that the $100,000 wasn't from Doheny at all, but a loan from a newspaper publisher named Ned McLean.
A newspaper publisher giving a $100,000 loan. It sounds far-fetched, doesn't it?
You could say that again. So Walsh, the ever-tenacious investigator, decides to call McLean in to testify. This is where things start to get really interesting.
McLean, wanting to protect Fall, initially backs up Fall's story about the loan.
So he lies under oath.
It seems so, but here is where fate steps in. Walsh's girlfriend, who happened to be friends with McLean's wife, drops a bombshell. It turns out McLean was practically broke at the time. There was no way he could have loaned anyone $100,000.
What a coincidence. Or maybe not.
Walsh, armed with this newfound knowledge, confronts McLean in a deposition. And under the weight of this revelation, McLean's story crumbles. He admits that the loan was a fabrication.
Wow, so it's a complete lie. Fall's cover story is blown to smithereens.
And it seems like Walsh is closing in on the truth.
But just as he's about to deliver the knockout punch, Fall claims he's too sick to testify further.
Another delay tactic. A classic move to buy time.
Unbelievable. But the investigation doesn't stop there, does it?
Oh, not at all. In fact, just when it seems like things are stalling, a truly unexpected figure steps forward with crucial information. Assistant Navy Secretary Theodore Roosevelt Jr.,
Wait, Teddy Roosevelt's son?
the one and only.
Now this is getting juicy.
He brings his brother Archie forward, who had been working as a vice president for Sinclair's oil company. Archie had been seeing some things, some very suspicious things, that he could no longer stay silent about.
Okay, let's hear it. What did Archie have to say?
First of all, he reveals that Sinclair had suddenly and very suspiciously bolted for Europe right after McLean's disastrous deposition.
Running from the heat much.
Certainly seems that way. And it gets even shadier. Archie admits that he received veiled threats suggesting that he should resign from his position, to protect his family name.
Wow, they were trying to silence him.
It's clear that someone was trying to bury the truth, no matter the cost.
Archie's testimony reignites public interest in the scandal. The web of lies and corruption is starting to unravel. And just when you think things couldn't get more dramatic, Doheny, the oil tycoon who gave Fall that suspicious loan, makes a surprising move.
He decides to voluntarily testify,
Really?
which no one saw coming. He admits to giving Fall the $100,000, but tries to play it off as a simple loan between friends.
A $100,000 loan between friends.
He tries to argue that it had nothing to do with the oil leases, even though the timing is incredibly suspicious.
The audacity is mind-blowing. But by this point, the scandal is a full-blown political firestorm. And President Coolidge, who initially tried to distance himself from the mess, is starting to feel the heat.
He can't ignore it anymore. The public is demanding answers, and someone needs to be held accountable. Coolidge is in a tough spot. The pressure is mounting. He can't just sweep this under the rug.
So what does he do?
He tries to do damage control. He promises a thorough investigation and pledges to prosecute anyone found guilty.
Sounds like he's trying to restore public trust, show that he's taking this seriously.
Exactly, but Senator Walsh, he's not letting Coolidge off the hook that easily.
Walsh, he's like a dog with a bone, right?
He keeps digging and uncovers documents that reveal Coolidge knew more about the Teapot Dome deal than he initially let on.
So those earlier claims of ignorance, not so true.
It's a major blow to Coolidge's credibility. The scandal is reaching the highest levels of government, and the public is starting to realize just how deep this corruption goes.
So Walsh finally manages to subpoena Fall, who'd been dodging questioning by claiming poor health.
But when Fall finally appears, it's clear something's different.
What do you mean?
Fall is a shadow of his former self. He looks frail, aged, walks with a cane. It's a dramatic transformation.
It makes you wonder if it's all an act to avoid answering those tough questions.
Everyone wants to hear what Fall has to say,
Yeah,
but
but-
instead of answering questions, Fall plays his final card. He invokes his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Citing the pending criminal investigation.
Exactly. It's a calculated move. It allows him to avoid incriminating himself, but it also leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
It must have been frustrating for Walsh after all that work to uncover the truth.
But even though the Senate investigation officially concludes, the story's far from over.
Right.
Coolidge appoints special counsel to pursue both civil and criminal cases, determined to get to the bottom of this.
But just as things seem to be quieting down, Sinclair, the oil tycoon who fled to Europe, makes a grand return to the U.S. I bet that made headlines.
He tries to put on a brave face for the press.
Yeah.
Project Confidence.
But behind the scenes,
Behind the scenes, he's scrambling to assemble a legal dream team.
we're not talking about some small-town lawyers, right?
Oh no, these are high-powered legal minds, masters of manipulation and delay tactics, experts in exploiting every loophole in the system.
And their mission?
Their mission is to protect Sinclair and his oil empire at all costs.
So what's their strategy?
It's multi-pronged, designed to create doubt and delay the legal process as much as possible.
Okay, I'm listening.
They challenged the legitimacy of the Senate investigation, claiming it overstepped its authority. They attacked the special counsels, accusing them of bias, demanding their removal from the case.
So basically trying to discredit the whole investigation, muddy the waters.
Exactly, and they don't stop there. They attempt to portray Sinclair as a victim, a successful businessman, unfairly targeted by political maneuvering.
Classic tactic shift, the blame play, the victim, hope the public forgets about the actual evidence of corruption.
For a while, it seems like their strategy might actually work, though legal battles drag on for years. Appeals, countersuits, procedural delays. It's a legal labyrinth.
But Senator Walsh isn't giving up, is he?
No way, he's determined to see justice served, no matter how long it takes.
Right.
He knows the stakes are incredibly high, not just for the individuals involved, but for the very integrity of American democracy.
Yeah.
And as these legal cases inch forward, even more evidence of wrongdoing emerges.
Like what? Give me the dirt.
Witnesses come forward with stories of secret meetings, shady financial transactions, a complex web of connections linking Sinclair, Doheny, and Fall in this grand scheme to defraud the American people.
It's like they thought they could pull the wool over everyone's eyes.
But there's one piece of evidence that proves particularly damning: a mysterious black satchel filled with $25,000 in Liberty bonds that was delivered to Fall's hotel room just days after the Teapot Dome lease was signed.
Wait, Liberty bonds, what are those?
Liberty bonds were war bonds issued by the U.S. government during World War I. They were seen as a patriotic investment and were widely held by ordinary Americans.
So this wasn't just any random cash, it was money that came directly from the people.
Exactly. It's a smoking gun, a
Yeah.
blatant payoff that shows the lengths these individuals went to enrich themselves at the expense of the public.
So this scandal, it's becoming harder and harder to sweep under the rug.
It's dominating headlines, sparking outrage, fueling calls for reform. People are fed up with the corruption and cronyism that have infected the government, and they want to see real consequences.
So the whole country is watching, waiting to see what happens next.
And this mounting public pressure, it finally forces the courts to act. In 1927, the Supreme Court rules that the Teapot Dome and Elk Hills leases were fraudulent and orders them canceled.
A major victory for Walsh and for the rule of law.
But the fight isn't over.
Now it's time to hold the people responsible for this massive fraud accountable.
The criminal trials began in 1929, with Fall, Sinclair, and Doheny facing charges of bribery and conspiracy,
These trials must have been major news events.
capturing the nation's attention.
And the verdicts.
A mix of justice served and frustrating loopholes.
Oh no, don't tell me they got away with it.
Well, Fall was found guilty of bribery and sentenced to a year in prison.
So he becomes the first cabinet member in U.S. history to serve time for a felony committed while in office.
It's a landmark conviction, a symbol that no one is immune to justice.
But Sinclair and Doheny,
Despite overwhelming evidence, they managed to avoid criminal convictions. Their high-priced lawyers used every trick in the book to delay, obfuscate, and ultimately undermine the prosecution's case.
it's like they got away with it.
It's a reminder that justice isn't always served in a neat and tidy way. Sometimes the powerful manage to escape the full consequences of their actions.
But even though they avoided prison, the Teapot Dome scandal had a lasting impact on both Sinclair and Doheny.
Sinclair, once a titan of the oil industry, saw his empire crumble. He faced multiple legal challenges, lost his fortune, and eventually ended up serving time in jail.
For the Teapot Dome scandal.
Not for Teapot Dome itself, but for contempt of court and jury tampering during one of the trials.
Wow. Talk about karma coming back to bite you. What about Doheny?
While Doheny managed to hold on to his wealth, the scandal tarnished his reputation. He became a recluse, withdrew from public life, and lived under the shadow of the Teapot Dome affair.
So even though they didn't go to prison for the actual crimes, their lives were forever changed by this scandal.
The Teapot Dome scandal was a watershed moment in American history. It exposed the dark side of the booming oil industry, revealed just how vulnerable the government was to corruption, and triggered a wave of reform aimed at increasing transparency and accountability.
It's amazing how one scandal can have such a ripple effect.
And it also showcased the critical role of investigative journalism reporters like Stackelbeck, played a key role in uncovering the truth, showing that a free press is essential in holding those in power accountable.
And we can't forget about Senator Walsh. He was relentless in his pursuit of justice, even when it seemed like an impossible task.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see how individuals can make a difference even when they're facing these powerful forces. But did the Teapot Dome scandal actually lead to any lasting changes? Did it change the way things were done in Washington?
Oh, absolutely. The fallout from Teapot Dome, it was a major wake-up call for the government. Public trust had been shattered, and there was a real demand for reform. It led to some pretty significant changes aimed at preventing similar abuses of power in the future. Okay, so spill the tea. What kind of reforms are we talking about?
One of the most important was the creation of the General Accounting Office, or GAO. This is an independent agency with a very specific job to keep a close eye on government spending and audit it. Federal agencies, think of them as the financial watchdogs of the government.
So basically making sure taxpayer money isn't being siphoned off to line the pockets of corrupt officials.
Exactly. Before the GAO, there wasn't a whole lot of oversight when it came to government finances. The Teapot Dome scandal showed just how easily things could go wrong without that kind of independent watchdog.
Makes sense. What other reforms came out of this mess?
Another big one was the Federal Corrupt Practices Act of 1925. This law was all about cleaning up campaign finance. It required candidates to disclose their campaign contributions and expenditures, no more shady backroom deals or secret slush funds.
So bringing those political finances out into the open transparency is key, right?
Absolutely. The goal was to make the whole process more accountable and reduce the influence of money in politics, which was a major issue highlighted by the Teapot Dome scandal.
It sounds like they were really trying to address the root causes of the problem.
They were. And the Teapot Dome scandal also prompted changes within the executive branch, specifically when it came to managing public lands and resources. They implemented stricter regulations for leasing and developing federal lands, especially those containing valuable resources like oil.
So no more sweetheart deals for oil barons looking to exploit public resources for their own profit.
Exactly. It was about ensuring those resources were managed responsibly for the benefit of all Americans, not just a select few.
This is fascinating stuff. Thinking about all of this, what would you say is the lasting legacy of the Teapot Dome scandal?
Well, I think it serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the corrosive effects of corruption on a democracy. It also highlights the crucial role of investigative journalism and whistleblowers in holding those in power accountable. Without people like Stakelbeck and Archie Roosevelt willing to speak truth to power, who knows how long this scheme would have continued.
Yeah, their courage is truly remarkable, especially considering the risks they faced. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Teapot Dome scandal, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
It's a story that reminds us that vigilance is essential. We can't just assume that our institutions are immune to corruption. We have to question authority, demand transparency, and hold our leaders accountable.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Teapot Dome scandal, a story of greed, corruption, and the fight for justice. We hope you found this journey through history as fascinating as we did. It's a tale that continues to resonate today, reminding us of the importance of a free press, the power of accountability, and the enduring battle against corruption. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another deep dive into the annals of history.